Hello everyone. Um, some of you may know my name is Tarundu Alapala. I'm a senior paralegal and head of immigration at Temple Gate Solicitors. I'm sure some of you were expecting my colleague Andrea Houseman, this week, but unfortunately Andrea has had to attend to a personal matter, which means that I'll be filling in for her. So apologies for anyone that may be disappointed by Andrea's absence. Andrea will, of course, be back on Thursday in place of my usual slot. So if you were looking forward to Andrea, please do make sure you tune in on Thursday, where she will be back. So for those of you who haven't been following this series of immigration advice segments, Templegate Solicitors, we've partnered up with the Group of Good Deeds charity, who put together this special project to offer help and guidance for anyone that needs it regarding your immigration circumstances in the UK. So during this live feed, I'll be looking to address some of the questions that you post on this feed. So I'll be looking to my right this time because my screen is on the right. So as you post your questions, I'll be looking over just to see what comments you may have. And of course, I'll do my best to answer them and to give you the correct advice, which I hope will help you. Of course, it's difficult to give complete and specific advice that may relate to your more specific problems without first getting a complete understanding of the facts of your matter. So where you have an issue where you need to discuss it with us in more detail, and you don't feel that this live feed is enough or it's the right place for you, please do feel free to get in contact with us. We usually, have a quick chat with anyone that contacts us over the telephone. You can always also email us on info@templegatesolicitors.com, and of course you can always go to our website, templegatesolicitors.com, for more information about us and for our contact details. So before the questions start coming in, it's Refugee Week actually this week. This week is Refugee Week, so I thought it would be good to start off by maybe talking a little bit about what it means to be a refugee from a legal standpoint. So what is the legal definition of a refugee? I was reading an interesting article on this from the Free Movement, which is a great place for immigration articles. But, the whole idea of what it means to be a refugee, because I think a lot of people get confused as to what it means to be a refugee. So some people, they come to us and they ask for help, and they say, look, I'm too afraid to return to our country because I've had a dispute with our neighbor, or my parents are too angry with me because I may have done something to upset them. So I'm afraid of returning to our country for those sorts of reasons. Unfortunately, there are lots of valid reasons for fearing returning to your country of origin. However, not all reasons are accepted by the Home Office or by the immigration system in this country. So not every reason that you give will amount to you being recognized as a refugee in this country. So if that's the case, then what does amount to being a refugee? In what circumstances would you be considered a refugee in the UK? So I'm just going to turn to the actual legal definition of what it means, what it means to be a refugee. So the legal definition was set out in the Refugee Convention of 1951. That's the UN Convention on the status of refugees. And that says that a refugee is defined as someone who is owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country, or who, not having a nationality and being outside the country or his former habitual residence, is unable or owing to such fear unwilling to return to it. So that was quite a mouthful, and that's quite a long sort of sentence, which which legally defines what it means to be a refugee. So that can be broken up into 5 parts essentially. The first part is that there needs to be a fear that is well-founded, right? A well-founded fear. So the first part is you need to show that you are afraid for some reason, and that is a well-founded fear. And then you need to show that the treatment that has led to that fear, that treatment is so bad that it amounts to being persecution, right? So fear in itself is not enough. You need to show that you have been treated in a particular way, and that treatment has to be so bad that it has to amount to persecution. The third test is that fear has to come for one of 5 reasons. So the reasons which were in that long sentence, the first reason is that it has to be for a reason of either race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or a political opinion. So if you were being treated badly or persecuted because of your race, that would count in leading to your definition of a refugee. If you're being persecuted because of your religious beliefs, and in some countries we know that happens, for instance, the Rohingya Muslims were persecuted in their country for reasons of their religion, and I suppose you could even say their race, for reasons of nationality, for reasons of membership of a particular social group or political opinion. You saw the genocide in Rwanda. That happened because some members were from one tribe and another from another. So you could say that forms, that the people from one tribe could become a part of a particular social group, and that they're being persecuted because of that. Or, of course, you could be persecuted because of your political opinion, and most often the sort of refugees that we see that are persecuted for their political opinion are journalists and political activists. Journalists who criticize the state, and political activists who campaign and criticize the state are usually persecuted for their political opinion. Of course, anyone can have a political opinion that is seen as a threat to a state or to a particular political figure, and they may be persecuted as a result of that opinion. So those are really the 5 what we call the convention reasons. All right, race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or membership of or having a particular political opinion. So if you then are being persecuted for one of those reasons, you could be recognized as a refugee, but you have to be outside of your country of origin, right? So if you are being persecuted and you are still in that country, then you cannot count yourself as being a refugee. You need to have left that country somehow or another. And the final reason is, the final definition, the final requirement for being recognized as a refugee is that you have to show that there is no protection in your own country which can give you the protection that you need against the persecution that you are experiencing because of one of the 5 convention reasons. So to be legally counted as a refugee, you need to be able to fulfill all 5 reasons. So, for instance, there are some people who consider themselves refugees because they are escaping their country because of civil war. We use that sort of language. We use the word refugee for people who are fleeing civil war, fleeing famine, fleeing environmental disasters, to define those people as refugees. And they are refugees, but not when you take the definition of the UN Convention and what it means to be a refugee in a legal sense. To be counted as a refugee from a legal definition, then you need to be able to fulfill those 5 points. So when people come to us and say, look, we're afraid of returning to our country because I'm afraid that my parents will find me because I ended up marrying the wrong person, that may not be enough to claim asylum here and to be recognized as a refugee. Other people will say, well, we've had a dispute with our neighbors, and our neighbors are very powerful, and our neighbors are looking to kill us if we go back. So what the UK authorities will say is, well, isn't there protection in your own country? Can't you go to the police in your own country or whatever other protection there may be, and ask them to protect you? So what we've found from our experience is that the threat or the persecution needs to be coming from a state level. So it needs to be coming from a political figure, someone in the security sector, such as the police or the army, someone that holds a lot of power to the extent that you would not be able to approach the authorities in that country and ask for protection through them. And of course, if someone held enough power, you wouldn't be able to go directly to the authorities, but the authorities that normally provide security for people in that country would be on the side of the persecutor. So yes, you generally do have to show, if you're claiming that you are a refugee, that the persecution that you're fearing comes from a state level authority. Such that you would not be able to seek the protection of the security sector in that country. So you wouldn't be able to go to the police, for instance, and ask them for protection. You also have to show that the fear and the persecution exists no matter where you go in the country. So a lot of applications for asylum in the UK get refused because the Home Office or the tribunal system often find that the person is genuinely fearing persecution, and that persecution is a well-founded one. However, they find that persecution or the fear is localized to a certain area within that country. One example that comes up is Afghanistan, where Afghanistan is broken up into so many different provinces, and there are different laws and different security systems available and different sort of ruling powers in the different areas of Afghanistan. A lot of Afghanistani applications, when they get refused, they usually say, well, you can move back to Kabul. Kabul has enough police and enough security. Kabul is the capital of Afghanistan, of course, and it's better controlled by the state authorities than some of the other provinces within Afghanistan. So some Afghanistani asylum applications do get refused because they say, well, you can relocate internally to another part of your country. In this case, you can relocate to Kabul and seek protection there. So yes, what I'm trying to say is, if you are seeking asylum and you consider yourself as being a refugee, then you need to show that your fear and that the persecution and the persecutor can basically find you and persecute you no matter where you go within your country. And I would say, that there is, there's a lot more that can be said about refugees, but I think I'll maybe just leave it at that for the time being, because I can see that there is a question that's come through. And hello, Haneen, thank you for your question. It says, is it true that when coronavirus is gone, the government will regulate the people who don't have legal status? Sorry about I think what you mean is, once the corona is gone, will they start to regularize the people who don't have legal status? Look, there's nothing to indicate that they will do. I think there are lots of myths going around. There's lots of stories going around about special concessions that are made for people. I know right now in Italy, for instance, there are special concessions, temporary concessions that have been made for immigrants that have no status there. I think there's a couple of other European countries that have made some sort of special temporary concessions. So they made some allowances and said to people who don't have any sort of status or who haven't regularized their stay, they've said to them, look, if you need to approach someone for help, or if you need to approach the authorities for help during this time, you can do, and you will not be in trouble. The UK authorities, as far as I'm aware, have not dispensed any sort of special concessions of that nature for people who haven't regularized their stay, and there's no indication that they will do. There are no bills, there's no government articles or any indication whatsoever that they will be providing any sort of special concessions or trying to regularize people in any manner or form yet. there isn't anything yet, but that doesn't mean that there might not be going forward. Of course, some of you who may have been in the UK for some time may remember the legacy casework section, which was opened up by the Home Office, or those people who had claimed asylum but hadn't received a decision for long periods of time, and then they found out there was a huge backlog of people without any sort of status in the UK because their cases had been pending through the Home Office, the cogworks of the Home Office, for so long. Then they set up something called the Legacy Casework Department, and that department's responsibility was to sort of find those applicants and those immigrants who'd been sort of stuck in the pipeworks for so long, and they were given a special concession, and their status was regularized. Of course, all of that came to an end, I think it was around 2010, 2012, I can't remember the exact date, but it was around that, the turning of the decade. We saw the legacy casework department coming to an end. Since then, there hasn't been any sort of special concession given to people who haven't regularized their stay. Of course, we also have to look at the current political climate in terms of who's actually in power. We have a Tory government in power. We have Priti Patel, who's head of the Home Office right now. If there were going to be any sort of special concessions, it would come from them. It's my personal opinion that we're unlikely to see any sort of special legislation that comes out in protection of people here who haven't regularized their stay, and it's unlikely we'll see that sort of legislation coming out from the present establishment, and I don't think we'll be seeing that from Priti Patel. I mean, it took quite a lot of effort just to get Priti Patel to acknowledge that people working in the NHS should not have to pay IHS fees. It took them some time to really admit that this is not right, and to change that policy. And from what I understand, even though they've said they're going to change that policy, it hasn't actually happened in practice yet. So you can see that any sort of legislation which may make life easier for immigrants and which may bring about some sort of special concessions for people whose status isn't regularized in the UK, it's going to be it's going to be slow to come by that sort of legislation, and I don't think we'll be seeing it after the coronavirus. I may be wrong, but this is what the existing articles and what's out there is indicating to me right now. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to give you anything a bit more than that. So I think there aren't many questions coming through today. It's probably because you're all missing Andrea so much and wondering why I'm here. But since I've got a bit of time, I'd like to sort of, considering, like I said, it is Refugee Week, so let's just have a look at, what does it mean to have a well-founded fear? So I did say, in order to be recognized as a refugee, you need to show that you have a well-founded fear of persecution in your home country. So what does it mean to have a well-founded fear? So it means that on the balance of probability. So if you are telling your story to someone and you are trying to convince someone that you're in danger, you have to convince that person that you genuinely are in danger. So what's the threshold? At what point does that person have to be satisfied that you are genuinely in danger? Do they have to be 100% convinced? Well, what we lawyers say is that you have to show that there is a well-founded fear of persecution, and that needs to be assessed on a balance of probabilities. That something is more likely to happen or not. Sorry, well, you have to show a reasonable degree of likelihood. Sorry, a balance of probability is what you would show in it on a civil standard, but in immigration cases and in refugee cases, you have to show a reasonable degree of likelihood or a real risk, and that's the standard that is basically applied. So you just have to convince someone that there is a reasonable degree of likelihood that there is a risk against your life in order to be considered a refugee, and in order to show someone that there is a well-founded fear of persecution against you. So just moving from that back to the questions, I can see that there's a question from Chico, and that says, I came here legally in 2011 and I hold a permanent residence since 2 years as a family member of an EEA, and I have not got settled status as well. I'm eligible to apply for British citizenship now. I have to reach 10 years of living in the UK. So I'm not quite sure what the question is, but I think what you're trying to say is that because you were overstaying in the UK since 2011, and you did eventually get your regularize your stay as a family member of a European of a European national, you've now got you've got the settled status, which means that they would have acknowledged your relationship retrospectively. So you know your settled status would have been granted from the date of your relationship and not from the date of your application. But I wouldn't recommend that you apply for naturalization yet because you had a period of overstaying in the UK. So the rules have become quite tough in this regard. Where you have had a period of overstaying or a period of stay in the UK where you didn't have a visa, where your status was unregularized, then you would normally have to wait 10 years from the date that you were granted leave, right? So from the date that you became legal, you would have to wait 10 years before you think about applying for naturalization. So you've got settled status, which is basically permanent residence, indefinite leave to remain, so no time restrictions on the length of your stay in the UK. So having settled status, I don't think you have much to worry about. Just make sure you don't get into trouble with the law, commit any crimes or anything like that, because that could affect your eligibility to apply for naturalization when you do come to it in, in 10 years or what we know. You have to count from the date that you were recognized as the family member of an EEA national, because that's the date that you were regularized. So you have to count 10 years from then, and that's when you'll be eligible to apply for naturalization in the UK. So Chica, I hope that sort of helped you a bit. So going back to what it means to be a refugee, so I just had a look at what well-founded fear means. What does a well-founded fear? It just means that you need to show a reasonable degree of likelihood of or a real risk that harm will be caused to you if you were returned to your country of nationality. So then what does persecution mean? Well, the meaning of persecution is not really strictly defined, right? This is sort of assessed on a case-by-case basis. Some people think that in order for persecution to occur, there needs to be some sort of a physical harm that's caused. In some instances, if there is physical harm, some people believe that that physical harm may have to happen over a prolonged period of time. Other people would say that physical harm could be just a one-off thing. In other instances, the harm could be psychological. There may not have been any physical harm. It may just be that you've been chased or that you are being hunted by the authorities. So it may be that you're not able to live freely, you're not able to live out in the open, that you have to constantly be in hiding for your opinion, that you may have to move around from place to place. That in itself can be a form of persecution because you're not free to live freely as you want in your country. You always have to stay in hiding. There's various different meanings of what it means to be persecuted is what I'm trying to get to. So there's no one definition. So if you do feel like you are being persecuted in your country, all you have to do is say so, and we'll have a look at the reasons as to why you've been persecuted. And generally, if you feel like it's enough where you don't feel safe and you can't live freely in your country, then there may be enough there to say that you are being persecuted. I'm just wondering, if you are, there are some people. One of the other requirements to being recognized as a refugee is that you have to be outside of your country. So you have to be outside the country where you're being persecuted. So in that instance, let's just have a look at someone that's in a refugee camp. So they're in their country of nationality, but they're actually in a refugee camp. Now, even though the camp carries the title of refugee, in the legal definition of their status is that they're internally displaced, right? They're not actually recognized legally as a refugee because they're still in their home country, even though they're facing persecution, and even though that persecution It might be it might be amount to very bad treatment basically, and that it's well founded, and it may relate to one of the 5 convention reasons. The fact that you're still in your country will mean that you won't be recognized as a refugee under the UN Convention. And look, I hope I hope this has given you some sort of an introduction or some clarity as to what it means to be a refugee, and the legal definition of what it means to be a refugee under the United Nations Convention, the Refugee Convention. The official title is the Refugee Convention. It is the 1951 UN Convention on the Status of Refugees, if you wanted to look that up. So I hope that's been helpful somewhat, and I can see that there aren't many questions coming through today, which means that maybe a lot of you are saving your questions for Andrea, hopefully, who will be here on Thursday. And I think I'll probably put an end to this live stream now. And thank you to those who have tuned in, and I'm hoping that you have found this very helpful. And please do catch me again. I'll be back, I think, the following Thursday. Andrew will be back this Thursday and the following Tuesday. So yes, if you need anything more, please tune in then, or contact us at any time you feel if you need more help. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.